Okay, I think we're probably ready to begin. So hi everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Rachel Feldblum Wood, Senior Business Analyst at the Bell Fund. So today's webinar is going to provide an overview of the Slate Development Program ahead of our November 27th deadline. We want to be sure that you're aware of any changes to the guidelines, the next application deadline, and that you know about our upcoming application clinics. We do these for Slate and for short form. This webinar is going to be a little bit different than our previous webinars in that our focus will be mostly on the eligibility criteria and the pain points that often trip people up during the application process. So we won't be going through the guidelines point by point, but we will cover any changes, pain points, and of course we'll have a Q&A. So a quick note for anybody that might drop off early, the Bell Fund application portal opens 1 month prior to the application deadline. So this year, that's going to be about October 30th. We strongly encourage you to start building your application ahead of November 27th. We find that the majority of applicants submit their application on the day of the deadline, and they often forget important documents and omit crucial information. Since this is no longer a pilot program, we're not able to amend applications after they've been submitted any longer. We just don't have the capacity. So basically, we've been a little bit more lenient about doing this in past rounds during our eligibility checking period, and we are not able to do this any longer. So if you begin building your application well ahead of the deadline, there's plenty of time for us to help you amend things if you notice mistakes or anything like that, missing items. But in terms of the final date to apply of November 27th, we will no longer have capacity to make updates once you've hit submit. The Slate program is increasingly oversubscribed. We're super busy on deadline day, so please also note that we're not going to be able to respond to eligibility questions on the actual final day to apply on November 27th. We usually get a ton of calls that last day, but it can take months to build a strong application. So we just want to provide this note early on just to please get in touch in advance if you have questions, as we just don't have capacity at that point. So on to the webinar. I'm joined today by Suzanne Lacey, Bell Fund's Deputy Director of English Canada, and Abigail Borja, Bell Fund's Operations and Communications Coordinator. So Suzanne's going to run through a presentation, and then we'll open the floor to a short Q&A. You can send us your questions by clicking on the Q&A button, and we will do our best to get to everybody. But remember that if we don't, it's no problem. You can always email us at info@bellfund.ca, and we'll definitely get back to you as soon as possible. So please hold your questions until the end of the presentation. And just to let you know, the webinar will be closed captioned. So you should be able to access the Show Captions button at the bottom of your screen. The video recording will be available on our website in the coming weeks, and registration for our application clinics should now be open. You're going to receive an automated email right after the webinar with an invitation to complete a survey. It would be great if you could provide feedback and let us know if this was helpful or what you'd like to see in future webinars. And that is it for my housekeeping. So over to Suzanne and Abigail.
Awesome. Thanks, Rachel. Hi, everyone. And Abigail is going to share her screen and show the PowerPoint, and I'll do the talking. And Abigail, if you could kindly kind of keep up with me, because at times I might go off on my notes to the next slide, but I think it should be pretty clear. Welcome, everyone. Okay, cool. Thank you. So the Bell Fund is committed to supporting a more equitable, diverse, and inclusive industry across Canada. So this means supporting screen-based producers, creators who identify as Black, Indigenous, and those from racialized communities, screen-based producers and creators from underrepresented groups, including but not limited to 2S LGBTQ1A+, and persons with disabilities, emerging screen-based producers, creators, and teams, gender parity, also regional representation, and OLMC communities. If you don't know what that is, if you're new to funding, you can look that one up. We can talk about it later. So the guiding principles have always been about ensuring that everyone has the opportunity to succeed in this program. So supporting underrepresented voices, and this is done by lowering the barriers to entry. So an example of that is not requiring a broadcaster in order to apply. There are other eligibility requirements, but you don't need a broadcaster necessarily. So that was really the driving force behind the creation of both the Slate program and the short form digital series program in 2017. And of course, we are a national fund, so we love to see interest from across Canada, in particular, outside of Ontario and Quebec, where there are lots of folks applying, and also outside of major centers like Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver. Okay, so next slide, we're going to talk briefly about the One Stop Business Workshop virtual series. So just before we get into the eligibility requirements, this is a great resource and it can significantly help you with your application process. So, and especially if you can't stay for the whole webinar today, just make a note of this because it is really helpful. And for those of you who've never applied to Bell Fund, some of these concepts might be new to you. It's a terrific resource. The One Stop Business Workshop Virtual Series. It's a 5-season series brought to you by CBC, CAVCO, the CMPA, and it provides a comprehensive overview of topics related to the business and financing of film, TV, and digital content. So be sure to check those out. Again, it's 5 seasons worth, so lots of content there. So this is a look at season 1, for example, what you'd find when you go there. They have these workshops, and some topics are things like chain of title. What do I need to be thinking about? How do I negotiate my development deal? Hiring talent from underrepresented groups in the industry, or how to get hired. How do I work with a distributor? So, and because Bell Fund's expectations are really high when it comes to application quality, you should access this if you're new, and it should give you a lot of help when assembling your application components, because there's some really great videos, resources here. So be sure to check it out. All right, a quick word about changes. Changes are 2023. Yeah, so we can go to the next slide. There aren't many changes for 2023. We have updated the guidelines, the finance document, and all the documentation, for the most part, just to indicate that it is all the 2023 versions. So make sure that you are using the correct version always when you're applying for funding. For the most part, there's only one major change for Slate, and that is when it comes to submitting your documentation for your market interest partner. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. You need a market interest partner for each project in your slate. We'll no longer accept letters that your partner might have written or a similar form from another funder. We do require that you use Bell Fund's template. There is a market interest form template, and it is mandatory that you use our template so that we're consistent across the board. Otherwise, again, a lot of it is just about updating the language for everything and providing as much clarity as we can. Okay. So what is the Slate Development program? So it is a selective program. That means it's a competition, as our short form digital series program, which many of you might be familiar with. And it supports Canadian independent production companies to build and diversify their slates by offering financial support for the development of original intellectual property, also known as IP, with the intent to grow and foster the independent production industry. I just read the slide there. And what does the Slate program support? So it supports development of 2 to 3 projects. It must be 2 or 3. It cannot be 1. And your slate may include series. We often see series. These could be TV series, including limited series. It could be a digital series or short form digital series. It could also be a podcast. So In addition to series, your slate may include development for a one-off feature-length documentary. However, it has to be planned for broadcast. It can't be only planned for theatrical release. And we don't have production programs for one-off documentaries. So this would just be if you have one-off documentary in your development slate and you want to come to Belfund, just be sure you can make the case that it is intended for broadcast. So the slate development, it is for scripted content. And basically that means it's not for content like news, talk shows, sports, the genres of drama, comedy, documentary, lifestyle, factual. And when we say scripted, basically we use scripted to differentiate content from things like reality TV. So even if it is a lifestyle show, a documentary show, we would expect that there is some written material, even like blueprints, outlines of scripts when we talk about scripted. So Slate does not support feature films, does not support short films, like one-off short films, and does not support interactive content. And by interactive content, I mean things like apps and games. As mentioned earlier, it does support web series, digital series. Certainly, we don't consider those interactive content. So just know apps, games, that sort of interactive content. Okay, on to eligibility requirements. There are lots. So as stated earlier, you must have 2 or 3 projects. Make sure they are eligible in terms of the type and the genre. Again, typically we see series that are lifestyle, drama, documentary. But again, the guidelines will give you more details in terms of the genres and formats that are eligible. As also mentioned earlier, you do need market interest from an acceptable market interest partner for each project in your slate. This might be the same market partner, or it might be different market partners for your projects. And we're going to talk more about what constitutes an eligible market partner, because it is super important for your slate application. Also, the development, the work you're going to do for your projects, it must not start before the application deadline. So don't have it start before the end of November. And in fact, even better, don't have it start until, maybe consider the spring of 2024, because you want time for your application to go through the eligibility checking process, the jury process, the board decisions and the announcements. So if you're getting the funding. And also, you don't want to be in a position where you find out you're getting the funding, but the jury has notes for you. They have recommendations and you've already started, right? So think about that when you're preparing your development schedule of activities. But definitely, you're not allowed to start the activities for this phase before the deadline at the end of November. One additional word on that is just that development, we all know development has several phases of development. Very early development phases, mid development, late development into pre-production. You might be starting off with script outlines, first drafts, and going into second and final drafts. So when you come to Belfund, you are coming for one particular phase of development. So when we talk about not starting your development activities, we're talking about your development activities just for this particular phase of development. You might have had a previous phase of development, and that's fine. But just for this phase that you're coming to Belfund for, make sure it doesn't start before end of November. Okay, so certainly at the time of application, again, end of November, you, the applicant, must be in control of the rights to each project in your slate. So we say all rights and underlying rights must be owned, optioned, or controlled by you, the applicant. We need to make sure if we're going into this partnership with you that you have control over this content and can do the things you want to do and hopefully eventually go into production with it. And we don't want you to come in for development if you're very close to getting a production deal. So if you're close to getting a production deal, this really isn't the program for you. And that's great for you. But we really are hoping these are projects that really need, say, 8 months, 12 months or so of development work in order to then be ready to pitch for production. Just because by the time you go through this process and you get contracted and you get things going, you don't want to then call up and say, I no longer need the money because I'm in production. It just takes a chance away from another project you might have or somebody else might have that could really use that time. Okay, so we also always tell people if they're new. So if you're emerging, and we always have a definition of emerging in our guidelines, and what we say is to be emerging, you have at least, I think we say you have at least one credit, one professional credit as a producer, writer, or director. So if you're applying to Slate, I'm just going to pull up the definition to make sure I don't say it wrong. Minimally, you have to be emerging, right? So we say you are a screen-based producer, writer, or director who has not yet acquired extensive experience, but has at least one credit as a producer, director, or writer in a professionally produced screen-based project. That might be a digital series, a TV series, a short film, a feature film. So it basically differentiates you from a student. You're not a student coming out and doing your first project. You've done something in the industry, because Bellfund is for professional Canadian independent producers. So, but everybody has to start somewhere. So if you're emerging, you've done at least one project and you're applying, then you should be fine. And again, if you have any questions about that, be sure to get in touch with us. You can always email us, and I'll mention this a few times, info@bellfund.ca. info@bellfund.ca, and we'll let you know what we think. So yeah, what we do say in terms of emerging creators, if it's your first time applying to Bellfund Slate or any funding, it's always great to seek out mentorship. This might be something that your market partner can help you with, or somebody else in the industry who's done this before. Because it is super hard. It's a lot of work doing applications. It takes a lot of time. There are a lot of different components like budgeting, production schedules, and in addition to any creative materials you might be, preparing, like your producer plan. So ask somebody for help if you haven't done it before. You do get 2 opportunities to apply, but you want to put your best foot forward. So it is always a recommendation, not a requirement, just a recommendation. And just to give you an idea of how competitive things are, and I'm not sure, Rachel, if this is from the last deadline, but I have a quote that said we received 84 applications in our last deadline, and that 77 of them were eligible. So
Correct.
that's from last year, from 2022. Okay, great. And so out of the 77 eligible applications, we were able to support 27. So that's great in that 27 independent Canadian production companies were able to receive development support to develop some amazing projects. But it also shows you that it's about 35% of those eligible applications. So so it is tough. It is competitive. So if you need help, seek it out. All right, enough about eligibility. Let's dive in a little bit to the market interest, so we can go to the next slide. So your slate, it is a slate, again, of 2 or 3 projects, but you are going to look at each project individually in terms of your market interest and also your budget and your finance plan, if that's applicable. You're going to do each one individually. So you do need a market partner for each project in your slate. Again, it might be the same one for all of your projects. It might be different ones. That's really up to you and what is most appropriate for your slate of projects. So your market partner could be a Canadian broadcaster. So it could either be that they want to support development of your project for their linear, traditional broadcast, or maybe for their digital channel. So if it's CBC, maybe CBC want to support it for GEM, or if it's APTN for Lumi, or Out TV for Out TV Go. So Canadian broadcaster is one option, again, either for linear broadcast or for digital platform. In addition to a Canadian broadcast, and as mentioned earlier, you don't have to go to a Canadian broadcaster. You could also seek out interest from a digital platform that is Canadian, non-broadcaster, or international, non-Canadian digital platform, or a distributor. Again, that could be a Canadian distributor or a non-Canadian distributor. So again, because Bell Fund is very supportive of Canadian independent producers in terms of, oh, my computer wants to restart. No. We want you to, achieve an audience, and whether that's in Canada, beyond Canada, and to hopefully have a company that can make money and contribute to a strong industry here. So certainly if you have an opportunity outside of Canada, you should come to us and ask us if you have questions about whether or not your market partner would be eligible. And there's more information in our guidelines about this, but basically you would certainly want your digital platform to feature entertainment programming, because that's what Bell Fund supports. We also need to make sure it's accessible to Canadians, right? And there's that term that is Canadians would know to go to this platform for content. They are marketing to Canadians. And when you look at the template that you now must use for your application, your market interest template, you'll get a better idea of what we're looking for in your market partner, because the market partner does have to fill it out, and they have to answer things about, their reach in Canada and the Canadian audience. So they can be non-Canadian, but we certainly need to know that they are serving a Canadian audience as well. And same with the distributor. There's language in our guidelines to that speaks to what an acceptable distributor would be. And there's language like they negotiate deals, they distribute the type of content that you are developing. So check those out to make sure your distributor is also that they're known in the industry as a distributor, right? So we just want to make sure you're partnering with somebody who is going to help you get through this development and review your materials and be a good partner for you and for us. So and because there's lots of options out there, be sure to get in touch with us if you have any questions about eligibility. Again, making sure they're a good fit for your project, right? Again, they distribute or they stream or they broadcast the type of content that you want to develop. And just a word about community channels. Community channels are channels like TELUS Optic and Bell 5. So those channels are not eligible market partners, nor are they eligible, for the most part, they are not eligible platforms for our short form digital series programs either. And we speak to this more on our FAQ at bellfund.ca. But basically, the reason that these channels are not eligible is because we need to know that your content is accessible to all Canadians, that all Canadians have an opportunity to access your content, whether it's on a streaming platform or, these are streaming platforms. So, and these platforms are just for subscribers to that particular company, TELUS or Bell, for instance. It's for their customers. So we don't support those as market partners. There are hybrid um, channels like Crave and Club Illico in Quebec. Um, and while they're under umbrellas of broadcasters, they're also accessible to all Canadians with a subscription. So that's why they're considered hybrid and they are eligible. That's a lot of information, but basically applications are complicated again. So a little more about, and we can go to the next slide, Abigail. So did I already talk enough about the channels? Yeah, again, just in terms of the distributor, I was mentioning a little bit about them. We do want to make sure, again, they're industry known. So that would mean they have a track record of supporting content like yours. They negotiate terms typically. They spend money on marketing and promotion in favor of producers. So, yeah, again, just email us if you have any questions. And again, because we are so competitive, you want to make sure that your market partner makes sense. Okay, let's move on and talk about copyright. Again, we're still with the eligibility requirements here. And as I mentioned, when you apply, we have to make sure that you own the copyright or that you've optioned it, basically that you control it. You, the producer applicant, are controlling the copyright. So what we say is that all rights and underlying rights must be owned, optioned, or controlled sufficiently to produce and exploit the program to the world. So you could demonstrate this with a signed and dated document. For instance, if you are the sole owner originator of the series, you just do a one-pager explaining that you are the sole owner originator, sign it, date it, and submit that with your application. Or if you're working with a writer or you're optioning the rights from the writer, you would have an agreement between yourself as the applicant and the writer. Again, a signed and dated agreement with the writer giving you the rights. And chain of title, for those of you who aren't familiar with this term, it basically outlines the rights where they might have changed hands over time. So you submit a chain of title to say, for instance, so-and-so owned the rights, and then I acquired the rights, and now I'm co-developing this with so-and-so. So it just gives a bit of a roadmap for us to see how the rights have changed hands over time. It might not be necessary, again, if you're the originator and the owner of the rights. You might not need that. All right, let's move on to finance plan and proof of financing. So what type of funding is it? Well, the funding is available as a repayable advance for up to 100% of eligible development costs to a maximum of $25,000 per project. So you don't need to have additional sources of financing, but having an additional source might demonstrate a strength, such as a strong market interest or strong industry partner. So I'm just going to bring something up to make sure everything's good here. So again, it isn't required. And we're very aware, and the jury is aware, that many market partners will not or won't be able to support your development financially. But I always say, it doesn't hurt to ask because it's a super competitive application, and doesn't hurt to have the conversation. This is very competitive. Besides signing up and supporting me by signing the form, is there anything else you could do? Is there any financial contribution you could make? Or is there any additional thing you can do for me, such as help out by, I'm not sure, just mentoring me on how to develop how to do an audience development plan or a marketing plan, or just something else they might be able to contribute. It's always helpful that it shows that they might want to go above and beyond for you. Again, it's not always possible. We encourage you just to have the conversation beyond just having them fill in the document. When they fill in the document, they're already agreeing to meet with you midway through development and have a discussion, and then have a final look at your materials and provide notes to you. So you're already doing quite a bit, but just have the discussion and see if there's anything else that they can do. Let me see if there's anything else I want to say. Again, you're going to submit a finance plan and a budget for each project in your slate. And if you do have additional financing, and we really encourage you to look around and see if there's any other ways that you can get some additional financing. It might not be cash, it might be in-kind support. Say you're doing a shoot and somebody's willing to provide the equipment as an in-kind. That is a contribution. So you might have something like that that could help out your application. So we encourage you to think of those opportunities and to include them in your application, because it all helps. And again, if you do that minimally, we want to see a signed and dated commitment letter for each source of that financing. As always with our programs, if you have unconfirmed financing from another Canadian funder, like Creative BC or Quebecor or TELUS, for example, that's absolutely fine. You just want to make sure you know the date when you'll get notified about your financing from them. Because what we say is, this is a bit of a mouthful, but what we say is, if you have that outstanding financing, you need to make sure it's confirmed within 30 days of when we notify you. So correct me if I'm wrong, Rachel, but we're notifying applicants approximately early to mid-February. So you'd want to make sure any outstanding financing you have is in place by early March, mid-March latest, so that you're fully financed and ready to go. Makes sense, right? Okay.
Yes, early to mid-February. That's what I have in my notes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so that's your financing. Again, you're asking for a max of 25,000 per project, 2 projects at least, or maybe 3. So you're either asking for a max of 50,000 or 75,000 for 2 or 3 projects. Excuse me. I know I'm turning my head around. Yeah, let's move on to the type of funding. So again, Slate financing is a non-interest bearing advance. So it becomes repayable if the project goes into production. So what we want for you is that you get green lit and you go into production, and then you pay us back at the start of principal photography. If this project or one of your projects in your slate or none of the projects in your slate go into production, you do not have to pay the advance back. But we want you to pay it back because that means you've been successful, right? So let's go on to the next slide. I think it's almost the last slide. So again, it's not enough just to be eligible. We encourage you to use the assessment criteria when you're filling out your application. We always provide the assessment criteria for all of our programs. It shows you what the jury use to assess your application. It shows you where points are awarded, say, for your company, for your team, for your plans. So it's super important to know that, because then you know where to put your focus. For example, when you look at the Slate assessment criteria, you'll notice that the content itself that you plan to develop, the content itself isn't part of the point system. It is almost more like a business application. You're saying, this is my company, this is my team I'm going to work with development on, these are my market partners, this is my finance plan, my development schedule. I'm a good bet to these are good projects for my market partner, for my audience. It's a good place. It's a good support for my company, and my company can really grow by developing these projects. So you're kind of making the business case for your company, because again, this is about supporting Canadian independent production companies to grow their slate. The jury isn't really going to critique the content except through the lens of maybe, is the content a good fit with your market partner? Is it a good fit with your production company? Is there an audience out there for this type of content? Where it comes into those discussions, they would be considering it, but they're not going to pull apart, say, an early draft that has been written and critique it on its creative merits. So so check out the assessment criteria so you understand things like that. For instance, in Slate, there's a lot of points for your company and your team. So it's really a place to focus. And even if you are emerging, and I know we get this question, how do I compete against very established companies when I'm emerging? And all we can say is you just do it. You show, again, you've already done something in the industry. You're not just fresh out of school, and you're going to show that. And you're going to show the team you've assembled. You're going to show that it's a very professional application. There's no errors. If you've needed help putting your budget together, you've got the help. Your development schedules aren't all on top of each other. There's room for you to get through all of your development periods with your different projects. So it's going to be a thoughtful application, and your market partners are going to be really supportive of you. And you're going to make the case that you're a company that would benefit from this and could really use the support and could grow. So the jury certainly is looking at all of these areas. Again, as mentioned off the top of this, they want to see applications from across Canada, from emerging, from diverse applicants. So all those things will be taken into consideration because often there are a lot of fantastic applications and high scores. So then they have to go back in and consider a lot of the details and to make sure that we're supporting, equally everybody out there is getting a shot. So, so just, I lost track for a second there. But again, in terms of the assessment criteria, team and your company, it's a super important part of your application. Don't know. Yeah, just a quick word on your budget. Again, you want to make sure with these applications that your budget aligns with your proposed activities and your development schedule, right? Because those are 3 documents in particular that can change over time as you're developing your plans. So-and-so isn't available to host the demo I want to shoot until 3 months later. So you change it in one document and you forget to maybe change it in another document. You just have to keep going back through your budget, your schedule, and make sure that they align because you don't want the jury to get frustrated and for you to lose points because, say, you mention in your producer document that you plan to hire a consultant to help you with a project, and then you neglect to put a consultant in your budget for that project. That's the kind of thing that frustrates the jury and you can lose points on. And it kind of speaks to your ability to do these things if things are not aligned nicely. And remember, they're looking at, as you said before, we had 84 applications. That's 84 companies putting in slates of 2 to 3 projects. So the jury has a lot of projects to look at. So just make it easier for them, make them happy when they're reading your application, and make sure you go through your budget, your schedule, etc., and make sure that they do align. And right, so on to application clinics. So if this is your first time applying to the Slate development program, you must attend an application clinic. And we'll open registration after the webinar. I think that's still the plan, Abigail. So if you meet or think you're going to meet all of the eligibility requirements, be sure to register for a clinic. And by the time we get to the clinics, because they're happening in September and October. So you'll either have your market partner for each project in your slate, or you'll be in the process of securing a market partner. Because again, of course, that's the kind of thing that takes a while. That's networking, that's pitching, that's talking with people, and it takes some time. So really be sure to be working on that now if you're serious about applying this year. And the date for the clinics are here on the slide. So September 21st, October 5, and October 19, all at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for English. And of course, we also offer the application clinics in the French language through our Quebec office. And also, if it is a requirement for first-time applicants to the Slate program, but other applicants are strongly encouraged to attend if you want to brush up on things. So sign up at belfund.ca. The clinics will be virtual meetings for up to 25 participants. And that's when we'll do this deeper dive into the application documentation. Again, that assessment criteria I mentioned earlier, how to prepare your competitive proposal. So, and you'll be able to ask questions and to interact and learn from other producers in the clinic. So let's see, I think we can wrap up the slides, but again, just reinforcing again, Belfund is super competitive in all of our programs, and we are typically oversubscribed. So if you have any weaknesses, like you haven't written applications before, or you have, but it's not a strength of yours, or budgeting is not a strength, be sure to collaborate with people who can help you. And be sure to reach out to us if you have any questions. Again, info@belfund.ca. And then if you think you're ready, we'll see you at the application clinic. I'm starting to cough, but luckily the slides are done and we can go to some Q&A now.
Okay, so I'm going to moderate the Q&A, and I'm just going to start with mentioning a question in the chat so that I don't forget about it. For everybody else, if you're able to put your questions in the Q&A tab, that'd be great, because sometimes they get a little bit lost in the chat. But the first one is CMF PPRC pre-development an eligible source of financing?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen that. Again, development can have and does have many phases, right? Early development, mid, later development. So that particular CMF program, if I understand correctly, yeah, it's early development, usually early script writing, first drafts. You might have had that already and had that in a previous phase of development, and you're coming to Belfund for the next phase of development. Or you want to combine the two. You have some development money from CMF, say to write a draft script, but you don't have enough to pay the writer what you want to pay them. So you're going to combine it into your Belfund application. Either way, it's fine. Just be really clear about whether it's a distinct and separate phase or if you're combining it with your Belfund phase.
Okay, so heading over to the Q&A, I have, are dramatic feature films eligible?
Nope. Again, feature films and short films and interactive content, those are three big buckets that Belfund does not support. We don't support feature films on any of our programs. That's more a telefilm. And provincial agencies like Ontario Creates that you'd want to speak to if you're in Ontario.
Okay. So we've got a question. For eligibility, you mentioned 2 to 3 projects. Are these projects you have done already to qualify, or do you have to submit 2 to 3 projects as part of your application? Can you apply for one project? The wording is just a bit unclear.
Okay, no. The definition of Slate, I'm just looking at our guidelines, is 2 or 3 eligible projects in development. So no, it has to be 2 or 3. It may not be 1. In the early days of this program, on occasion, we allowed 1 on a special occasion, but we stopped that. Must be 2 or 3. Not clear about, are they done? So they're in development. So, but an interesting question because again, because Slate development is so competitive, what I would say is you may come to the program at any phase of development. I would say there is a sweet spot that is maybe mid development. Um, because if you've already done some development on your projects, you will have a team around you. You will have, say, a writer that you are going to work with. Maybe you've decided you want to develop a video demo for your project. You will have already decided what that will look like. Is there an on-air host or actor? So if you're a little bit along in development, you'll be able to bring those elements to your application and help build, I would say, a stronger application than if it's very early and there is, very little in place, right? Because again, you have to look at that assessment criteria and see how you're going to build points. So when it's asking about your team and who is on your team and is there diversity on your team, et cetera, then you want to be able to say, well, yes, I'm collaborating with so and so. So I hope that helps. You might have an earlier phase of development and you're coming to us for the next phase. Again, you can come for any phase, but I would just encourage you to that if you've done some development already, it might make for a stronger application.
Okay, so the next one is, hi Suzanne, is TikTok considered an eligible digital platform, assuming they could trigger? So, yeah, just a question of
Um,
TikTok.
so, and Rachel, you can help with this one. It would really, we had a short form digital series that was approved by Bell Fund with TikTok as the platform. So in that case, they had a TikTok channel that had a really good following, and they were building on that with their application. I don't know if TikTok would be willing to fill in a market interest form. It would be interesting, I would say, if they were willing to support you by filling in the form and answering the questions and agreeing to meet with you and give you notes. I think it's certainly, would you say, Rachel, a discussion we would have?
For sure, but I think it would be very, very unlikely that you would get that from the platform, just like with
Mhm.
YouTube or Facebook. Like, generally, it's more a specific channel. So if there's a TikTok channel and it's not your channel, and it's a reputable, like popular channel, and you think it would be a good fit, we could certainly look at that.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
yeah, you can reach out to us with any like nuance because I'm sure it's a larger question. But yeah, I think we would consider it if it was the right channel.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is the channel. It is just like with YouTube, because often people will ask, is YouTube an acceptable channel? It's always like, well, YouTube's a platform, TikTok's a platform. We're looking at specific platforms or channels and who owns them and what content do they have and how are they going to support you. So yeah, absolutely. Same thing. And same thing when you have a TikTok channel that you're thinking of applying with, info@bellfund.ca and talk to us about it.
Okay, so the next one, you already touched on Bell 5, but this question is, would Eastlink TV or Bell 5 TV1 be acceptable market partners?
No to Bell 5. Eastlink, I think, is the same is a community channel, if I understand correctly. Um, Again, they're not eligible for any certified independent production funds. Those are the Canadian funds like the Rogers Fund, the TELUS Fund, the Bell Fund. Um, we are not allowed to fund content, sorry, that is on those channels. And again, that's because those channels are only accessible to people who subscribe to those. Sorry, my throat is so dry. Subscribe to those services, and we must support content that is accessible to all Canadians. So again, you're welcome to reach out to us if you had a specific question, but in general, those community channels are not eligible.
And that is, we have been asked about Eastlink specifically, and that is, that's unfortunately the case. Yeah. So, we've not, we've not been able to mark that one as eligible just because it is a community channel.
Right, I thought so. Okay.
Yeah. So moving on, will the eligible platform list be updated as it hasn't been updated in a year? Actually, I think we have updated it, and it's not, I'm just going to take this one because I kind of
Yeah,
manage
yeah,
that
for
list.
short form.
Yeah, it's not exactly a comprehensive list of every eligible channel or platform. It's just sort of like a sample so that you can see some channels and platforms that have been approved in the past. My advice would always be to err on the side of caution and reach out via email because often we do like to see a platform pre-approval form, even if it's for a platform that we funded a few years ago or something like that. So, yes, we'll probably update the list as we get new kind of general good examples to add that are not program specific because that's maybe not as helpful. But right now we don't have any updates to make to the list.
And that's the list that we generate mostly based on our short form digital series program, right? Those are the
It is,
channels that come
yes.
through there. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so the next one, if you submit 3 projects for Slate development, do all 3 projects need to get funding or can only one of the 3 be selected?
Yeah, now it's all or nothing. So it used to be that the jury could pick and choose which ones in the slate would go forward. But now it's all or nothing. So you want to come in with your best slate of 2 or 3. Again, it is about helping a company develop a slate of projects. It's not a development program for a project. So what I would suggest to you is if you have 3, but the third is not super strong, and you're concerned that it will bring down your score, you might want to come in with 2. Again, looking at that assessment criteria, put yourself in the position of the jury and think, gosh, if there's really nothing here to get points with in this third project, maybe hold that one off and focus on your 2 strongest. Because again, it will they'll score each project individually, and then that will average out to your overall score. And again, it is super competitive. Your score has to be great just to be in the running for that top, 35% or so that will get funding.
Okay, moving on. So each of our chosen 3 projects are different genres and formats and have market interest from different market partners. Would this help or harm our application? Should we select projects that are more similar?
Um, the only way it might harm your project, your application, would be if the jury felt you were maybe going off in too many directions. But I mean, if you have 3 projects and you have market interest for all 3 projects, that sounds fantastic to me. Um, uh, it's your company and it's your company's mission and focus and plan to grow that you have to decide on. And obviously, if you have market partners, they believe in you and want to see these projects go. And maybe that's part of your process of growth is to see which ones go through development and go into production and which ones maybe don't. So yeah, I think the only thing to keep in mind as well is um, um, the feasibility for your company. If you're a very small company, are you taking on too much with 3 projects and 3 very different projects? And are things going to overlap? And might the jury be concerned that you're doing too much at one time? But if you have strong market partners, you have a good development plan in terms of your schedule, and it looks like you can pull it off, like they don't have concerns about feasibility, then it's really up for you to say. But there isn't any specific issue with you having different genres or formats. Again, you just want to put yourself in their shoes and think of and make the case that this makes sense to you and you can pull it off and it's part of your journey.
Okay, so can the distributor be owned by the producer or production company who's applying?
Again, I think I don't think there's any rules against it. I don't think we say you must be a third party distributor. We try and make sure, that it's fair for everybody, because sometimes there's hybrid companies that have distribution arms and production arms and streaming arms. But you do want to make sure you look at the definition of an eligible distributor, and that the distributor is all of those things, right? The distributor is known as a distributor. They are distributing the type of content that you are developing, and they do all the things that we say a distributor does, like negotiating terms and helping with maybe marketing and promotion support and supporting the producer. So you still have to make sure your distributor does all those things. But yes,
Oh,
they don't need to be third party necessarily.
okay. Can in-kind support be provided as an acceptable form of support for the 2 to 3 projects we submit?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I think that the example I used is you're going to shoot a video demo, and a company, let's say William F. White, because I know they're very supportive. Let's say they supply your camera gear as an in-kind contribution, and that might have cost you, $3,000 or something for the day. So that might be an in-kind contribution, say, of $3,000 for your shoot, and they would sign a letter, um, committing to that. That's just one example, but it might be an edit facility, it might be some other form of in-kind, but absolutely an in-kind contribution is financing. That is money that you would have had to pay if this person or facility did not provide it. So yeah, good idea to bring that. It also shows, it shows the jury that you're hustling, how to do your job as a producer. You're trying to get the financing so you can get the thing done. So yeah, absolutely, in kind counts.
You mentioned commitment to support diverse producers, and you said an example is not having market partners. Can you explain further?
Oh, that was part of the reason in creating short form digital series and Slate programs back in 2017, was that a lot of the, for 20 years, Bell Fund supported interactive projects and they required Canadian broadcasters. Canadian broadcasters were the trigger in order to apply. So that was changed in 2017 so that short form digital series and Slate development producers could apply without a Canadian broadcaster. And I know we're out of time, but just again, that quick example of the TikTok platform. Somebody applied and their own TikTok channel was their channel, and they received funding. They didn't have to go to a Canadian broadcaster, because our feeling was a lot of those meetings with the Canadian broadcasters and success getting licenses and support was maybe going to more established producers, and there's a new generation that weren't necessarily getting those meetings. So we wanted to offer other options for coming in for funding besides just going to the Canadian broadcaster.
Okay. Do you want to take 1 or 2 more, Suzanne, or do you think we need to end
I
the
think
Zoom?
if anybody wants to stick around for 1 or 2 more, I can do it for sure.
Okay. Let's see. So can we combine Bell Fund Slate with other provincial development funding? For example, Alberta Media Fund.
Yep. Again, absolutely. It's like the other question about the development. The big thing here, again, you have to decide if this is the same phase of development or is it a separate phase. Often funders like Ontario Creates, for instance, for some of their programs, they have very distinct development phases. You come in for first draft script, you come in for a second draft script, you come in for a polish and package. Bell Fund Slate Development Program does not have those distinct phases. It's all phases, or you're welcome to apply for any phase of a project. So you just want to make sure you're very clear, what phase are you coming to Bell Fund for? Is that the same phase as the Alberta funding? If it is, combine them, come in with both, or keep them separate if it makes sense to keep them separate. You're still going to tell us about your other phase of development. It's going to be part of your application. And but yeah, just be really clear what phase, and either combine them or keep them separate. It's up to you, whatever makes sense.
Okay. Can mentorship costs be included in the budget, like a mentor writer or mentee writer?
I don't think you'd call it mentor, but I mean, that would be, say, a story editor, or, an exec producer, a consultant. Certainly you can budget for that individual to work on the development phase. Um, but they're working, not really. If they're working on the application itself, if that was a question, then no, you wouldn't be budgeting for them, because again, your activities you're asking for support for can't start until after the deadline. So if you're asking for support to put in your application, that wouldn't be part of your budget. That's something that your company overhead, your development costs, for an earlier development period in the lead up to November 27th. Is that the date? 27th would go for it. So yeah, you would not budget for your mentor to help you with your application, but you may budget for support as part of your team, certainly, to get you through development.
Okay, so here's another one. Can a producer apply with one project 100% owned by the producer, and the second in which the ownership is a 50-50 co-pro with another producer?
Absolutely, and we see that all the time. Again, we just need to make sure you, as the applicant producer, have control over that content. I think we say 50-50 is fine. Again, it is development. We're not talking production here, so we're not going to lose sleep over whether it's it's 50-50 is fine. I think we say that is acceptable. And oftentimes we do see that development projects in development with different producers is fine. Oh, Rachel, there, you're back. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Maybe we can do one more.
Sure.
When applying for development of a scripted TV series, could eligible costs be for development of a pilot plus pilot script editing and demo of the pilot, or should it be development of the entire series?
It really comes down to what you feel is going to make basically the best pitch package for you to take this out to market to, streaming platforms, broadcasters, whoever you're going to approach. Typically, I'd say we see 1 to 2 scripts people are asking for, or a short non-broadcast video demo, teaser, trailer, whatever you want to call it. Usually not trailer, teaser or demo. Again, it's a maximum ask of $25,000. So it's great money, but it's not massive budget. So you'd have to see how expensive your writer is and how expensive your shoot is. They're both very expensive items, writing a script and shooting a demo. So what is the thing you need most for this phase from BellFund? And that's the thing you want to ask for. It might be an outline and a demo, or a first draft and a demo. Maybe you can squeeze, or hopefully you have some additional development money, and you could make both of those things work. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, so I guess we should probably stop there. For anybody that did not get an answer to their question, please do reach out via info@bellfund.ca. We're always happy to discuss, and sometimes they can be kind of like tiered questions, like multi-layered, and maybe a conversation might even be more helpful. So yeah, thanks everybody for coming, and good luck with your
Thanks
application.
everybody. Yeah, good luck. Maybe we'll see you at the application clinic. I think you can register now.
Yes, hopefully we'll see you there.
Oh, Abigail, hi.
Hi, everyone. So registration will be available in the next hour for the application clinic. So just, in an hour, you can go to our website and you will see the option design.
Perfect.
That's great. And remember, space is limited for those. So if you can't make it, be sure to, is there a way they can let us know or they can cancel ahead of time, Abigail?
Absolutely. So yes, so if
Mhm.
you're not able, if you reserved a spot in the clinic, but you're not able to make it, you can use the same confirmation email that you will receive after registration to cancel it, to make sure that your spot goes to someone else. And then if you try to register for a clinic and are not able to because the clinic is full, you can send us an email to info@belfund.ca, and then we might be able to open a spot for you. So please don't hesitate to reach out.
Okay, that's great. And be sure again to access all the 2023 documentation. And again, take your time. These things do take many months to build. And we do have the portal open for a month prior to the deadline. So you have time to get in there, build your application, save your draft, submit. It gives us a chance to review things. And, if there's any issues, maybe you have time to fix something before the final deadline if you get in a bit earlier. I think that's fair to say, right, Rachel?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so good luck, everybody. Hope to see you at the clinic.
Okay. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.